everybody's story. I need a video. It's on the facing. We're doing book candies. You know, we're doing this guy is interesting. And you know, innovation. So, they really feel the one to yeah, anyway, yeah, it was like, anyway, I love this. Good, glad. Good. I really have some. And somebody just need to hear the same thing, from a different perspective, or a different person, a different source. We all know this, so that's okay. It's just, it resonates differently. You just want.
All right, lovely folks on YouTube. We are going to start in just a couple of minutes. If you're actually live waiting for this, I apologize for the delay. If not, then you're watching it on just after it was been recorded. You didn't know that we started 15 minutes later than that we planned to. But we're going to start in just a minute, and hang tight. Yeah, send me an email out to there's 1 o'clock. Watch that. On them. All of them. Are you saying? Great news.
I got the file that over leadership and then Atomic Habits. 7 habits. 12 minutes is an app that gives you executive summary of any book that you want to find that have it. Okay. The other book is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective.
I read that book 25, 30 years ago.
I think I first read it about 20 years ago.
It was incredibly transformational.
Yeah.
There's 7 ideas.
Yeah.
And they're great ideas. Every single one of them. They're rock star ideas.
It's a long, big book, however it's short.
Yeah. Read it in bits and pieces. Don't try to read it all in. But one that I've always really been inspired from in that book is Cooking with the End in Mind. So you imagine your own funeral. Okay. How do you want people talking?
Yeah.
What do you want them to be?
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Begin with the end in mind.
7 habits of
Highly.
Go ahead. I gotta make a phone call.
It's by Stephen Covey. Covey. Great one.
Was there anything else, Robert?
Or is it?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michael.
You got it, buddy. Exactly.
Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hobby.
By Stephen Covey. That's right now.
So how much place it? It does. We did about say no.
Oh, you don't have that. Oh, as soon as you get that, we can onboard.
Yeah.
Okay, who's?
Very good.
All right, we got to get going because we're supposed to be done at 11 and we're starting very late. So we'll do what we can. What we're going to do in this workshop, hello Zoomers, or actually YouTubers. All right, we're getting started. We are going to talk in the next while about working with buyers. And our focus is going to be on features of working with a buyer agent, the benefits of working with a buyer's agent associated with those features, and going above and beyond to really stand out in a crowd of other agents out there doing the work, right? So here's what we're going to talk about. Value proposition, that came up in the last hour. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about secret sauce, features versus benefits, and we're going to go through a bunch of examples. And if there's time, I don't know that there will be, but if there's time, we'll do some role play. Does that sound good to the folks live in the room?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. So value proposition. So, you know, if you haven't had a chance to talk with me about this at all, your value proposition is what you do in your job that is worth something to the client that you want to hire you. They answers the question, why should I pay you for your efforts? We heard a value proposition in the last hour, which was twofold. Number one, here is how I'm going to communicate with you, and you can rely on that, and here's specifically how. And I'm going to be working to find you your home or find you a buyer for your home, like find you a home to buy or find you a buyer for your home from 9 to 11 every morning, and you won't hear from me. I won't be returning your call till after 11. I'm going to do that 5 days a week. That is different, right? So that allowed that agent to have a real compelling dialogue to have. Imagine you're at a bar and someone finds out you're a real estate agent. They're not thinking about any of that stuff. You can say to them something like, well, I'm different. Really? Aren't all real estate agents doing the same thing, opening the door, blah, blah, blah? Well, no. Here's why I'm different, right? And you can say it without arrogance and without being rude. It's just, so what is your value proposition? Now, I want to point out that even though you haven't sold any homes yet, or maybe you've only sold one or two, you all have a secret sauce. Does anyone remember when there used to be a big, what is the secret ingredient in McDonald's Big Macs, I think it was, the secret sauce. All of these, if you go to In-N-Out Burger, you can order, there's something that you can order, the way you order your fries that's different. Animal, it's not on the menu, right? That's kind of like a secret sauce, right? This is idea that you each have unique experience in life before you got your real estate license. It may not be direct or a specific part of what it means to be a real estate agent, but you can leverage it. Maybe you speak another language. People who are native language speakers of the language you speak are going to, just by definition, feel more comfortable around you if their English isn't as strong as their primary language. Maybe you have experience in bookkeeping or accounting. You know numbers really good. Maybe you worked in a tax office and you understand property taxes and you understand capital gains taxes really, really good. Could be anything. Everyone has at least one. So I want to talk about features and benefits. A feature for the point of this class is a task associated with the job being performed or the service being provided. Very simple, a simple task. For example, the number one for us, or not number one, but one of the important ones that is very obvious, the public gets this, is we show properties to potential buyers. We let them in the house. They can't normally go in the house unless it's an open house, right? So they can't get in without us, right? That is a feature of what it means to be a real estate agent. Can anyone think of another one? What is something real estate agents do? Comp. They do comps. That's right. There's another good example. We help our buyers and sellers to figure out a fair offer price or a fair price to accept for a property in the marketplace. We show them comparable sales data. We're going to get into that later. And there's like 8 or 10 or 15 of these things. We're going to go over 8 or 9 of them, I think. Benefit is different than a feature. Okay, a feature is the thing. The benefit is why it matters, why it's helpful. How is the performance of that task going to be worthwhile to the person who's getting it, such that they'll pay for it and be comfortable and be happy paying for it? When you go across the street to the Walgreens and you pick up a candy bar, you are willing to part with money in exchange for this good, which is a candy bar. There is a value there. Now, if the candy bar was triple the normal price of candy bars, you might not buy the candy bar because you don't perceive the value, even though they made it 1/3 bigger and charged you 3 times as much, right? We make these decisions all the time. Let's bring it to a professional. Imagine you're hiring someone to prepare your tax return. Why would you do that? Why not just use an online software? And many people do. Well, because you believe you have reason to believe that the knowledge they have about doing taxes is going to save you money. You might pay them $400 or $500, but it's going to save you thousands. That's a good example. Okay. So why am I making a big fuss about features versus benefits? All real estate professionals, no matter where they're trained, if they had any training at all, are expected to do the features of the job. Show properties, do CMAs. right? List properties for sale, and all the other things. We're going to do a whole bunch of examples. They're all expected to do that, whether they're properly trained to do it or not, right? But most real estate professionals aren't able to explain why it's important. They're not able to show why it's valuable, why they should be willing to pay and not get paid. And that's why there's a market for discount brokers. A percentage of the public is not persuaded of the value of our services. The top agents in this company, whether they be buyer's agents or listing agents, regularly get 3%, not 2.5%. Sometimes they get more than 3%. They're not special people with gold covered arms or anything. They're not necessarily even working more hours. They are able to share their value proposition to a client, and the client says, yes, I'd be willing to pay double that. I'm getting a deal. I'm only paying 3%, not 4%. So the point of this next little session is to give you some tools so that you can make that conversation with confidence, even though you haven't sold a house yet. And by the way, if you're good at talking about your value proposition and talking about how you go above and beyond, you can talk like the last speaker, and people will never ask you how many homes you've sold or how long you've been in the business. It won't happen. Because they'll think, oh my goodness, they must be doing this for years. And what you can say to them when they ask you how long you've been in this, you could say, oh, seems like forever. It'll go no further than that. I'm not saying you should lie. If someone presses you, you should be honest about it. Then you can go down and talk about your team and talk about how you're surrounded by a whole group of other agents. So you're actually getting a deal, Mr. Buyer, because you only are going to pay for one cost of one agent, but you're going to get the benefit of 3. Me, my mentor, and my team lead, or my team leader productivity coach, or both. So we're going to go through them now, but before I start, does anyone in the room have any questions about what I've said so far? Anything? No. So let's start digging in. This, on the left-hand side, is a job description, a feature. And on the right-hand side is the benefit. And then underneath is how we do better, how we go above and beyond, elements that might become part of your value proposition. So needs assessment, what the heck? Helping bring clarity around what properties are most suitable. Have you ever talked to a buyer or who isn't sure exactly what they want for the money they have? It happens. They think they want a 3-bedroom, but they only have a budget for a 2-bedroom. So us doing an assessment with them of what is important to them, why they want to move, right? Being in that curiosity mode is an important, really important part of what I do. We presumably understand market conditions better than them, understand what they're going to be able to afford to do with the money they have on hand, right? So clarifying needs versus wants. But one of the things we can do to go above and beyond is help the client understand and work through preparatory steps. So the buyer comes to you and they're really keen to buy a 3-bedroom house. Have you talked to a lender yet? No. That's not the end of where our goal is. We have a lot of things we can do from that. We can, at the very minimum, connect them with lender partners who can help them assess what they can afford to do. We can also, as we get more experienced and better, do a pre-qualification of ourselves. When you get good, if you're good with numbers, you can say, okay, so you've got this much in the bank and you've got this much savings and you got this, you're telling me you got good credit. Let's just assume you got great credit. Yeah. And how much do you pay in your mortgage every month or your rent every month? How much do you want to pay on a mortgage maximum? You don't even need to be good at math anymore. You can use software tools and tell them, based on what you're telling me before we even go to a lender, it looks like the maximum house price for you is going to be about X. A lot of agents don't even do that. Oh, you don't have the pre-approval. Here's my lender's number. But what if they tell you that they can only afford $3,000 a month, and you ask them about their earnings, how much they bring in every month, and you ask them about their money. They've got $5,000 in the bank for this, and they can only afford $3,000 a month. If you look at one of these calculators, you will quickly realize that they can't afford in the Bay Area pretty much anything, not even a condo, right? An entry-level condo in the worst depths of the worst neighborhoods, right? So where does your conversation go from there? It's not over. That doesn't mean you should kick them out to the street. Sorry, you can't buy a house today. There's all kinds of work you can do to get them ready. Mr. Buyer, there's so many ways around this. Maybe we could connect you with another. Maybe you have someone in your family who could be a co-buyer with you or a friend. Maybe we can look at below market rate housing or down payment assistance programs to help you get the cash you need. Maybe we need to work on your credit, and we can connect you with people who can help you with those things. So preparatory steps to get your client ready is something the better agents always do. They don't just give up, right? They're not so arrogant as to say, you're hopeless because you don't have the money right now. And sometimes, and I know from experience, what they tell you they don't have the money isn't the true story. They actually do have the money. They just don't understand how money flows. And so this is where you can become a detective and say, well, if you do it this way and you consider that source of funds and you look at this income that you weren't counting, we might be able to make something happen here for you. And your lenders will help you. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be an expert in the money or how that works, but it's a great thing. The other thing is connecting your buyer with key business partners, not just the lender, but maybe a first-time home buyer assistance program or a tax person or even a lawyer in some situation. So these are ways that you can go above and beyond on the needs assessment. The number one way best agents succeed in doing a good needs assessment and going above and beyond, and it isn't here, is listening. Listening. That's the key. Can I go to the next one?
Yes.
Okay. Finding property. Well, this is not what I was giving the example of before. This is different than showing property. Finding property. So this is what was talked about previously. It is kind of expected that if you're a buyer's agent, they hire you, that you're going to send them your list. Whether you do it with the MLS or a third-party service, like there's a tool out there called Real Scout, you're sending them a list. It's more fine-tuned than them looking on a third-party company like a Redfin or Zillow. It's better than that because you can see better what's going on. Okay, but it's that idea. That is a benefit, right? If I'm a buyer out there and my agent sends me a list, it's really helpful, especially if I'm not a super Zillow or Redfin user and I don't really have time to go set up my own searches. It's a value, right? I might be willing to pay for that, right? But that is not enough. As we just heard in the previous class, you want to go above and beyond when you're finding property too. So don't just send them a list. Do some research on all the properties you send them and give them insight on that property before or at the same time that you send them the information. That's really important. You can find out about recent sales in the area by calling agents. Let's suppose your buyer is looking at a house at 27 Main Street. You might want to call the listing agent and ask them about it before your buyer, you go to show it to the buyer, especially if there's something about it, like it's been on the market a long time. Wouldn't it be good before you send them or when you send them the listing to already know the answer of why it's been on the market for 90 days? Stuff like that. Maybe you talk to a colleague or a colleague with this company or with another company who is a neighborhood expert, who you see their name popping up on all these listings in that neighborhood. Some of them will be very happy to tell you about what's going on in the neighborhood. And that all of a sudden makes you more insightful, right? You will have access to off-market listings. Start talking to agents who have a lot of buyers and sellers in that neighborhood and call them and say, do you have anything coming up? I have a buyer and there's not a lot of inventory. What do you have coming up that might work for my buyer? Especially if it's a top producer in that neighborhood. What about knocking on the doors and finding a buyer, finding a listing for them? Mr. Seller, my client, Bill and June Smith, we're looking in this neighborhood specifically. Do you think you might want to sell? You can do something, golden letters are the same idea, but it's a golden letter is a you send them a letter in the mail. But you could do door knocking for the same thing. And these are just some examples. The idea here is that the best agents distinguish themselves from other agents by going above and beyond, by doing more to find a suitable property. Even before the buyer has said they want to go see it, right? You're sending the buyer your list. What if every time you sent the buyer your list, it was annotated? Because they're looking at these same properties on Zillow, and you want to distinguish yourself as having value. One of the ways, look at it more generally, one of the ways you distinguish yourself as having value is by knowing something about the property that you share with them that nobody else knows, that is not on the internet. Mr. Buyer, I did some research on 27 Main Street. I don't think we need to go see it. It's been on the market 90 days because the seller overpriced it. And, even though it has possibility, it's not going to work for you because he's completely inflexible or whatever. There's a problem with the foundation. There's a problem at the rear of the lot that there's no fence and it drops down to a cliff. Who knows what it is? Right? But you can save if you were to send your buyers an annotated list or commentary, even just an email. Hey, I just went and looked at 27 Main Street. It doesn't really work for you. The kitchen has not been updated in 50 years. It's all closed in. It's going to take $50,000 worth of work for it to work for you. And I know cash is tight. We may want to pass on that one, even though the pictures were beautiful. However, if you want to go see it, we can go see it. That sort of thing. It doesn't have to be a lot of time and effort. Even sometimes you can get insight about the properties without going to see them, just by a call to the listing agent and your careful review of the description. It's shocking how few agents do that. It is shocking how many agents create a list, send them to their clients, and then they're hands off. It's what distinguishes buyers agents from people who don't want to work with buyers, right? Has anything I've said seemed like too much work? No. All right, let's talk about the next one. Another one in our list is showing property. I have a lot of strong feelings about this. Going and showing the property. Every person out there who hires you thinks you're going to open the door, okay? And that is a value to them. They know they can't get in by themselves unless it's open, and maybe they aren't doing an open house. So we are bringing them showing the property. Now, there's an expectation, that when we show a property, that we're also going to know something about the house and something about the neighborhood, right? Mr. Buyer, as we're going through, this is the only home for sale in this neighborhood. It's been on the market 17 days. Sellers are looking at offers as they come in. The seller is also reporting that the pest inspection came through and all the work was done. So we aren't going to be looking at any structural issues with this house. Minimum, bare minimum, right? How do you go above and beyond? Well, first of all, go look at the house first before you show it to your buyer. Even if it's 2 hours before, even if it's 15 minutes before they're going to meet you there, go walk it. Don't you think you might see something that could make you able to give them some insight? Mr. Buyer, I was here and took a look at this property for you. And I definitely want us to check out the basement. It looks like crap. I'm warning you right now. We're going to go down there. The seller's stuff is everywhere. We're going to have to tiptoe around the rat droppings. However, this basement looks like it has a great possibility for you to put in that extra bedroom that you're going to need. And, it might take us a 6 months or a year to do the permits and everything, but I want us to be thinking about it because I think it has great potential. I'm just giving you examples. I'm making them up. There's all kinds of things you'll see. Mr. Buyer, when we go to look at this property, let's look at the fence line because there's a weird jog in. I had to have this happen. There's a weird jog in it. And I think the fencing, that somebody went the fence too far on one side. We may have an issue with what we call encroachment in our business, where one person has gone on to the other person's property, and I want you to take a look at it. Don't you think you're going to look smarter than the average bear, right? You're going to be telling them something that they might not have even noticed. I had another one. When we get to this property, when we, where you can even text them. When you're getting to the property, look at it from the street and notice how the roof eave of the next door house overhangs the walkway in between the two houses. That is not kosher. That is not right. We don't want that. That's called encroachment. I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but I do want you to see it. What if you do customized home tours? Mr. Buyer, we're going to go out and look at homes. Come meet me in my car first and give them, and this, I have an agent in for our Fremont office that does this. I'm going to give you tea and cookies, or you maybe just surprise them. I have tea and cookies, and here is my little booklet for you of the 4 homes we're going to see this afternoon, along with a little write-up beside each one of what we're going to be seeing and what the price is and what I think we're going to need to do to get it. I mean, whatever. Make it an experience, right? Don't you think you're never going to forget that buyer's agent if you remember that they always fed you tea and cookies every time they showed you property? Or, I don't know, beer and nachos? I don't know. Probably not alcohol. It's not a good idea. My point is this agent is making an attempt to distinguish themselves from other agents and create an experience for their buyer that makes it fun. Because as much as we love looking at houses, not all our buyers are going to feel that way. Some of them, it's stressful. Some of them are moving under stressful circumstances. Some of them are just so intimidated by the whole process. It's such a lot of money. They're scared. So how do we make it better? We make it fun. Share info from the listing agent, neighbors, colleagues. If you do some due diligence, you might find out that the next door neighbor house was sold by a colleague in your office just 2 months ago. Phone them. Hey, I'm going to show the house next to yours. It's on the market now with so-and-so. What can you tell me about your experience selling that house beside it? You'd be surprised at what intelligence you learn. Yeah, be careful. There's a guy across the street. He came over during my open house and all he wanted to do was talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Keep an eye out for him. That doesn't really help your buyer, but it's a kind of, you learn all kinds of stuff, right? Let's talk about disclosures. It is expected that you as a buyer's agent will obtain on behalf of the buyer seller documents and disclosures. By the way, advertisement on next Friday, the 8th of November, I'm teaching a class on disclosures, how to read a disclosure package. Anyway, so you get these disclosures. You, as a real estate agent, know how to obtain them. You will share them with your buyers who may not have had access to obtain them themselves. So that is certainly, the access to it is a value to the buyer. It's a benefit, right? Helping the client to understand complicated and lengthy paperwork. I don't know how many of you have actually looked at disclosures, but I'm sure those of you know that they can run in the hundreds of pages, right? It's your job to make that make sense, because don't you think the buyer might be a little intimidated when you send them, you just basically dump onto them this huge PDF or a series of PDFs and say, read this. You want to write an offer, got to know what you think. You need to decide if you want to write an offer, read this. Okay. That alone, I mean, yes, they expect you to send them the disclosures, but I think the benefit we provide is helping them to understand it. At a minimum, they're expecting that you're giving them everything, but maybe you didn't get everything. Maybe when the off-property disclosures are available from the seller, there's missing stuff. Do you know how to look at a disclosure package and know what's missing? Do you know how to get what's missing on behalf of your buyer? That is part of basic benefit, because the seller is expecting that you will get them the disclosure documents. Now, the contract that the buyer goes into has allowances for late delivery of disclosure, but you need to know what's missing and how that impacts how you're going to write the offer. Let's suppose it's a property with an HOA. and there's no HOA documents prior to your offer writing. That's going to impact the decisions you make about having a contingency for delivery of HOA docs, for example. That's all basic. Every agent should know that, should be able to do that, right? But that's a benefit, certainly a benefit for a buyer, right? To know that their agent is looking out to make sure the contract's going to get filled out because of the missing disclosures. How do you go above and beyond? Well, first of all, you're about to write an offer. Call the listing agent. Reach them, contact them, text them, I don't care. Reach out and find out what you don't understand, what it's about. There'll be stuff you read, no matter how much experience you got, where it's like Greek. Call the listing agent. Because if you're wondering about it, your client almost certainly is, unless they're super sophisticated agent with 10 years experience and just retired. Right? Call the listing agent. Ask about things before the client asks about them. Another value add of a good agent who goes above and beyond is they're able to help the client understand what's important and what is less important and what is trivial, right? For example, trivial, and I say this with all due respect for the legal disclosure obligations, many of the big brokers have a disclosure, including ours, that says, Mr. Buyer, please note that this is the square footage by public record, and it may or may not match what is actually there, and you should do your due diligence. The brokers don't give any assurances that it is accurate. You know why? Because 20 or 30 years ago, there was a lawsuit, and the buyer was very upset because the square footage was this, but it really was that, and so we have a document now. It's perhaps arguably it's important that the buyer look at it, but is it as important as the pest report showing $15,000 worth of Section 1 work? Is it as important as the preliminary title that shows different owner name than who the seller told you to write the offer to, or the public record showed? Is it as important as the natural hazard disclosure report that shows the properties in an earthquake zone? Is it as important as the HOA budget that shows they're about to impose a $10,000 per unit special assessment next year? So when we talk about disclosures, we're going to learn more about them, right? But you need to know how the better agents help their buyers assess this. What items are worthy of further research and consideration? So my personal practice is once my buyer has said they want to write, and they're serious about writing, they're leaning in that direction, I will then do an hour. I will go through the disclosure package and I will put together a document with bullet points on all the items I want them to be aware of. Not necessarily bad things, just stuff in the disclosure package I think they're aware of. And I'll start at the very top with a big bold message saying, this is not a reason for you not to have to read it, Mr. Buyer. You're the buyer, not me. However, here are some bullets of things that I think are worthy of focusing on in our conversation that we're having later. Any questions about disclosures for this context? Yes.
The priority that you go through?
Yeah, those are some of those, well, not in that order, but those are things that come up. I am far more concerned about a $10,000 special assessment than about whether the square footage is, the disclosure about square footages. You know, although there's something to it. In some circumstances, there's very good reason to question the square footage, especially if there's unpermitted additions where the public record square footage is going to be too low, right? Or there's some reason to question it. Then we're going to bring it up in the context. Even though the public record square footage is this, Mr. Buyer, please note that that we have reason to believe. Okay. And when the appraiser goes through, he's going to come up with a different number, and that could impact whether it appraises or not. I mean, we could go on and on about square footages if it's relevant. But I mean, I'm selling a home right now, and it is a cookie cutter in a subdivision. Not the home. My listing's beautiful, but the layout is one of 3 or 4 layouts that were built all at the same time in this big development east of here, and the square footage is exactly the same as 3 or 4 other recent sales and 3 or 4 other active properties. I mean, not 3 or 4, but it's the same layout. So I'm fairly confident about the square footage is what I'm saying, right? So anyway, let's talk about the CMA. Someone brought up earlier how doing a CMA is part of our job representing a buyer who wants to write an offer on a property. Absolutely. The benefit for the buyer is we help them to understand the current market conditions and local comparable sales prices to establish a fair offer price. By the way, guys, doing a CMA is not just about that property, it's about the market. Broaden your perspective. You don't want to just research similar properties, 3 to 1,500 square feet in the last 90 days. That's absolutely part of it in that neighborhood. You also want to learn what's been going on in that neighborhood, what's been going on for all properties, what's been going on in that city or that zip code at least. What are the general trends that have been happening around there? Is there anything going on locally that's impacting supply and demand? You know, for example, why are there suddenly 10 listings a month when there were only 2 listings a month before? Huge red flag. You should look at that. Yes. It depends. In Oakland, we have micro neighborhoods, and sometimes street to street can be different. But for example, let me give you a good one. If you know Oakland, High Street. On this side of High Street, on the west side of High Street, you've got Allendale and you've got the Lower Diamond, right? On the other side of Allendale, you have Maxwell Park. Maxwell Park is a far nicer neighborhood, just by one major street. So it depends. The geography depends, but try to avoid doing circles. If you don't know where the neighborhood changes, like for example, I have a home right now I'm selling, I mentioned before. In the same subdivision, you have a whole bunch of homes built in the 1940s and a whole bunch of homes built in the 70s. And they're different neighborhoods, $100,000 price differential, even though they may only be 4 blocks from each other or even less. And so a lot of agents don't get it. They just do a big circle and say, you know, this one is this and this one is that. And it has to do with the quality, and the neighborhood deteriorates pretty quickly when you get into the between the two. And it's a relatively modern area. So you get stuff like that. So how do you go above and beyond on a CMA? Call the listing agent for comps that they have. If you think their offer amount is too high, Mr. Seller's agent, I'm representing a buyer who had some interest in your property, but he's a little intimidated by the price. Now, it's a great property for him. I really want to do a deal. I think this would be a great fit for him, and I really want to share with him something, but I'm having trouble myself finding comps. Can you share with me the pricing, how you got to this price? What is your seller's expectation? Even before you write the offer, right? Talk to people who have pendings. How many offers do you get? You know, what was the market like when you were selling this as a listing agent? What kind are you willing to tell me how much you're in contract for? Most of them won't, but you can ask. Oh, you're not willing to tell me? I totally respect that. Can you give me a ballpark? Are you near or at the asking price, over it, or under it by a lot? They might tell you that. They might not. It's worth a try. What about viewing active listings around the property you're writing on before you write the offer? So your buyer, you can go to the buyer and say, you know what, I thought this was a great comp, but I went to see it. And even though it's got the same layout, same layout and same square footage, it is not comparable to yours. Yours has beautiful hardwood floors and an updated, beautifully remodeled kitchen. And this one that is on the market competing with you is got an old, undated kitchen and carpeting. And it looks like it has a really old roof, and you just replaced your roof 3 years ago. Right? Or the seller. I mean, I'm thinking seller, but if you're talking to a buyer, that's why the price that they're asking is not unreasonable. That comp that is in the market at the same layout is very different. That adds value to your buyer's experience. You are now an expert. You're doing the job of a real estate agent. I would argue that is, there are some agents, if the whole idea of not doing that would be anathema, it would be like, how do you not do that? But I got to tell you, let's suppose you decide you get a lead to represent a buyer in Tracy or Patterson or someplace you have to drive out to. You got to be really thoughtful because you don't know the neighborhood, you don't know the city, you don't know local custom. You better be doing this, something like that, if you're going to go out of the area. And you should do it for all your buyers. when you get serious about a property. But the good news for you guys in this room and on this YouTube is that most agents don't do this. So you can get it, you can get ahead of the pack, show your value, get an amazing referral, an amazing review on Google Business, and the buyers will become allies in helping you to grow your business after that. Okay, let's talk about reviewing contract and associated offer paperwork. At a base level, that is something we do. Buyers expect it. The benefit for them is it helps them to understand all the details of what they're signing. That's why we make a big fuss of you guys taking contracts classes. So you can answer their questions. What is a contingency? What is the appraisal contingency? How do liquidated damages work? You know, what does it mean if we close on this in 17 days? Stuff like that. You can go above and beyond on this part by verifying the pre-approval is good. You know, might verify it's still good. I always want to do that with lenders that I don't work with regularly and I don't have a trust yet with them. I'm still building trust with them. Because sometimes a buyer will give you a pre-approval from their lender that you don't work with regularly, and that pre-approval is a month or more old. Well, who knows if it's been checked and updated? Who knows that the interest rates haven't changed to the point where the pre-approval is out of date? So verify the buyer's pre-approval. You want to make sure that it shows the right offer amount on it, right? Proof of funds. Make sure the buyer has the down payment they say they're going to have. Explaining all the intricacies of contract terms, setting expectations regarding timelines for closing and contingency release, reviewing offer paperwork with buyers prior to writing offers so buyers know what to expect when they find the perfect house. If you're working with a first-time buyer, wouldn't it be helpful to say, let's have a sit down as we get started here, let's go over the contract. It's a very important thing. You're buying your first home. Buying a home is one of the most important things you're going to do. It's a great step to wealth building. I'm so proud and excited for you. Before we find a house that you want to write an offer on where there could be stress associated with what to do about the offer terms, let's just go through the contract. Let me show you all the things we're going to be thinking about. It's going above and beyond. Offer preparation and submission. The buyer's expecting you're going to put together the paperwork, that you're going to get the signatures done, and you're going to avoid, it's not going to have technical problems, right? And it makes it easier for them. That's the benefit, right? Because if they had to do it themselves, it would be like, what form do I use? What do I fill in? How do I know what to write, right? How do I get it to the other side in the right way? How do you go above and beyond? Well, submit well-written, well-presented, and professional-looking offers. Offers that make it easy for the agent representing the seller to recommend your offer, even if it's not the highest price. Because they have confidence just by looking at it that you know exactly what you're doing, right? Have the blender for the buyer call the listing agent to promote the offer before they review it. After you submit it, before they review it. Strongly recommend you do this. If your lender partner doesn't want to do it, then you need a new lender partner. What kind of questions do we care about? That the buyer, if the buyer and lender have previous experience, and they've worked together before and done deals before, that's good for the listing agent to know. If the buyer has great credit and the property, the purchase price has been run through a desktop underwriting system, so they know they're already on the way to approval. It's not, and I think what if the lender says the buyer has I shouldn't say it that way, has plenty of reserves in the bank to cover themselves, so they're very well qualified. I've worked with them before. Whatever it is, right? All very important tools that you can use to go above and beyond when you're presenting offers. By the way, on the portal, on the agent portal, and on my YouTube coaching page, there is a class I taught about a month ago or 2 months ago on how to write a winning offer. How, not terms, but how to present it in a way that it will get accepted. Negotiate the offer. So many buyers expect that you're going to save them money. You're going to save them money because you're going to get them the best price by being a hard-nosed negotiator. So how would you do that? let's suppose you're not experienced negotiator. What do? Well, first of all, talk to the listing agent. And sort of, if one of the things you want to understand is if they'll tell you, why is the seller selling? Right? Try to get to their motivations. Understand comps to justify the position. We are in a buyer's market in many aspects of the area around now. If you're writing on an offer on a property, a condo here in Oakland, that listing agent is thrilled. They don't have people dropping down the door. So don't you think you can write a fair offer that's at the low end of the comps and see what happens? You're very more likely now to get a counter than you were in 2022 or earlier. But you need to know the comps. If you come in 50,000 below the comps, now you're gambling with your buyer's offer. So you want to talk about it with your buyer, because the lower the buyer goes, the less likely they'll get a counter offer. But the seller's desperation is important too. If you happen to know that the seller has taken a job and they're leaving in a month, or maybe they need this money for the cost of what it's going to be for their next property, then that's really, really important information your buyer can use to help figure it all out. So talk to the listing agent, understand the comps. The other thing you want to do is your lender can help improve the bargaining stance in their conversation with the seller's agent by talking up your buyers and what great buyers they're going to be. Because there's two things sellers want when they when they accept an offer. One, the weights and terms for sure, what the price is and all that. But the other thing they want is they want assurance that the deal will go through. What I like to say is until an offer is accepted, the seller has all the power in the relationship, accept or not accept the offer. Once an offer is accepted, whether there's contingencies or not, the buyer has all the power in the relationship, and the buyer can walk away in many, many cases and still get their deposit back, even if they write non-contingent. It depends. The point I'm trying to get at is you can leverage that power when you're negotiating the offer. Consult with other agents at the brokerage. Talk to your mentor. Talk to your productivity coach. Talk to other agents that sold in that neighborhood to get a sense of how you can negotiate best for your client. All right, managing escrow. Another thing we do, and this is really important, is we manage the transaction. We make sure it gets to the end. You're all excited, your first deals that you got into contract, or you got your first listing. You actually got to get it done, right? So in terms of buyers, we've had agents in this program who got their first buyer into contract, but then the deal fell out 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, and they were devastated because they were already counting the money. You don't get paid until it closes. Some of the hardest work you will do in this business is when something happens in an escrow and you have to get it across the finish line. I actually had a tragedy. I had a property under escrow, and the seller passed away in the home in the middle of the escrow.
You're on the buyer side.
No, in that case, I was on the seller side, but I could have just as easily been well, actually, I lie. I was on both sides. It was a dual agency. I had a buyer's agent on my team. She represented the buyer and I represented the seller. So we did represent the buyer. Navigating that it was a thing. My point is God forbid, nothing like that should ever happen to your escrows, but there is work to be done. And this is a value that buyers don't think about, but when they give it a few minutes thought, they realize it. Most in our area, it's a pretty sophisticated market. Most buyers know that, especially where financing is involved, anything can happen and real estate transactions are complicated. So they respect that their agent is going to keep the ship of state afloat, to make sure it gets to the end. That's a value. That is a benefit. Ensure a smooth transaction and low stress for the client. Overcome the complexity of real estate transactions. One of the best services you can provide your buyer, especially a first-time home buyer, is to make the experience fun and as light as possible, but honest and professional. So that when they're freaking out, you're as cool as a cucumber. Even if you're freaking out inside. How do you go above and beyond? Number one, set clear expectations with an organized calendar of events and advisories. Mr. Buyer, we're now in contract. Congratulations. Here's your escrow calendar. Here is when we're removing contingencies. Here is when we're doing our final walkthrough. Here's when we're closing. Here is what your deposit is due. Here's how much your deposit is. Here's the person who's going to call you to arrange for the transfer of your deposit. All stuff like that. Mr. Buyer, have you got your home insurance in place yet? Mr. Buyer, I wanted to talk to you about supplemental property taxes because you're going to get, that's a big factor in your transaction. Whatever it is. Mr. Buyer, we're going as per your contract, a home warranty is being purchased on your behalf. I'm going to send you the brochure. Here's the coverages that we think make sense. Let us know if you want an upgraded package. I could go on. There's more. Mr. Buyer, utilities are going to be transferred to your name at close of escrow. Sorry, utilities need to be transferred to your name at close of escrow. Please reach out to PG&E and the garbage company, whoever the collection company is in the area. Please reach out to make arrangements for water transfer into your name before you get the keys next Tuesday, so that there's no interruption of service. And et cetera, other things. There's lots of other things. So if you make sure that all the parties are informed every step of the way, you are going above and beyond, because expectations are pretty low about that. But what's our job? Do it. Also, anticipate potential issues in advance. Now, it is harder to do that when you're brand new and don't have any transactional experience. That's why we have a mentor, right? You can talk to them about all the stuff in it and they will say, hey, look out for this, look out for that, consider this. You know, it's like chess a little bit. You want to be a couple steps ahead. What happens if this goes wrong? What happens if that goes wrong? You want to be a little skeptical, not to the point of not being trusting, but just to keep your eye on the ball. Imagine it this way. If anyone here familiar with American football, right? Where you have a quarterback and they're running the play. Well, they've got to think about what happens in that split second before they throw the ball. What if the guy doesn't catch it? Right? What happens if they're doing a running play and the guy gets tackled, or what, God forbid, a quarterback sack where you get kicked. I'm sorry about the sports analogy. My point is, you got to have a little bit of anticipatory judgment. That's going above and beyond. Also, clear two-way communications and sign-offs with all parties. Do not ever have this happen to you. Mr. Buyer, we are going to meet at the property at 4 p.m. And the buyer says, great, see you there at 4 p.m. That's not enough. You have to close the loop with a thumbs up or got it, great. Every communication you have, especially text, but email, verbal, a little less so because it's verbal. But if you are not on the phone, if you are texting or email, close the loops on all your communications. Sometimes that means sending an email to confirm. As per our text exchange, here is an email that summarizes what it means to write a non-contingent offer and some of the risks you're taking as a buyer. Just closing loops. And remember to be always the professional. Okay, that's it. And I'm only 7 minutes past the top of the clock, so I'm really happy about that. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. I do. Well, we have zip forms for the actual legal paperwork of the offer. We have HomeLight, which is where the offer gets submitted to on a portal, a web portal for giving the offer over to the seller, or you can email all the pages as one PDF. But there's not, I don't use any special software for compiling the different elements. And in my class that you can watch on YouTube about doing this, you'll see there's a lot of different elements besides the legal offer paperwork itself. You have to compile it. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. So what you're seeing on the screen now is a QR code. And if you want a copy of this presentation, the PDFs, the PowerPoint slides, you can click on this QR code, answer a couple of quick questions, and my assistant will send you a copy of the presentation. And this is, of course, going to be available on YouTube for people to watch again and again, if they wish, on my YouTube channel and ultimately on the agent portal. Everyone get it?
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
What was the name of the class?
It's called Working with Buyers or
Buyer
Features, Buyer Representation Features and Benefits. All right, my friends on YouTube, let me stop sharing and let me stop the YouTube.